Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me today is Melissa Batchelor, PhD, and we're going to be talking about designing age friendly communities today. Melissa is not only a nurse, she is a nurse educator, she is a researcher, she is a policy advisor, and she works in the field of gerontology, which means dealing with older people. So, welcome to the show, Melissa. You're not a stranger to this show, but it's been a long time since we've spoken, and I'm glad to have you here in the time of COVID.
As I'm getting ready to cough. But thank you. It's nice to be here with you. It's been a long time.
You're doing a lot of things. You're at GW University. Like I mentioned, you're a nurse educator. You also host the podcast, This is Getting Old, moving towards an age friendly world. And people should look for your podcast because this is where you are dealing on a regular basis with issues we should all care about, mainly because at some point, all of us are going to be old. So tell me, when you talk about designing age friendly communities, what are we actually looking at?
So I think when most people hear the term age friendly, the first time they hear that term, they think that we're talking about only older adults. But actually, when things are age friendly, they're friendly for everyone. And the example I tend to give is down in Florida, they have an age friendly community that has like a beach. And one of the things that they did to make it age friendly is they put down kind of this covering over the sand so that people, even with disabilities, could, so older adults, people in wheelchairs, people with walkers, they did that so that they could access the beach. But guess who loved it the most?
Moms
Moms
with
with strollers.
strollers. Right. So
Yeah,
that's so when you say
right.
age friendly, you really have turned that on its head to say, and at one point I think we called it universal design. What you
Yes.
design to make things easier for people, whether that's ramps or it's a walkway to the sand, to the beach, you are helping people who might have mobility issues regardless of their age.
Right. So when things are age friendly, they're friendly for everyone. It's kind of the catchphrase because it really is about universal design and making things accessible for anyone. And if you think about a lot of even the technology things that are happening now that are age friendly, so if you think about your car, like I actually had to buy a different car when I moved to Northern Virginia because I was like, I need, there's too much traffic. I need like sensors on my
Right.
or on the little side view mirrors. You have the things that on your car that tell you if you're getting too close. You have warnings if you're getting too close to the person in front of you. So all of those things that are being done improve, accessibility, safety for all ages, but in particular older adults, just because of the normal changes that happen with aging.
And how did this kind of evolve? At what point did people wake up to say, we need to make more things more accessible to more people and prioritize that in our design? And two, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which has been around for a long time, and sort of mandated certain ADA compliance sorts of things. It seems to me what you're talking about even goes well beyond that to just a different way of thinking about design.
Right. And so ADA, in my mind, that has to do a lot more with like physical structure, like sidewalks, ramps, inclusive of staircases, things like that. But this is really, it started with the World Health Organization. And then in the United States, AARP is the convener for age-friendly cities and communities. Um, so it has to do with thinking about the experience of an older person either entering your business, maybe if they want to return to classes to kind of retool themselves after they retire from their primary occupation. So age-friendly universities. So there are a lot of different initiatives within the age-friendly concept, but it is a global concept that's been out there for a couple of decades. And I kind of got into it because when I started at GW, I'm the director for our Center for Aging, Health, and Humanities. And I guess it was like a year and a half ago, we were doing a health policy leadership lecture series. And they said, oh, well, you can do one on aging for the spring. And I was like, oh, I want to do it on age friendly health systems. And even though Washington, D.C. is an age friendly city, they had not heard of the age friendly health systems movement. And then as I started kind of looking around, I was like, there's there are a ton of different age-friendly initiatives. And so it's kind of now it's the theme and kind of part of the strategic plan for the Center for Aging. It's the name of my podcast. And, it's called This is Getting Old, but it's really not about getting old. It's about all of this stuff that's not in place for an aging society, which then improves the quality of life for everyone. So that's kind of how I got interested, kind of the evolution of it. There are different cities and communities around the U.S. And if you wanted to know if you were living in an age-friendly city, you can go to the AARP's website, and they have a whole list so that you can kind of see where your city or your community is in the movement. But I think it's catching on just because of the consumer drive, and technology as fast as it advances, is just helping everyone.
Well, there's two tracks here. So there's the research and there's data, right? So it's important. You are a researcher. And so data drives a lot to show us the patterns of things and how people are really living. And that's very compelling to see what the data says. The second thing is advising on policy, right? So it's kind of like we should have certain kinds of policies. And it seems to me the third thing is cultural. It's like sometimes things catch up, for instance, ride sharing, Uber and Lyft, which has dramatically increased the mobility for people who no longer drive, because you can get someplace simply by calling for ride share, right? And none of us saw that coming, the idea that somebody would just use their car and take us places on demand through an app. But closed captioning on television, smart TVs, you don't have to be hard of hearing. All you have to do is just flip on the closed captioning. And so that has kind of been built into this cultural expectation now about being able to flip on closed captioning. Another thing
Which
is
I actually watch. I use closed captioning for everything that I watch because
my son does too. My son does too. My son is 30. He always watches every show with closed captioning. I'm like, what are you doing? But it's an option, and he uses it. The other thing, when you talked about an age-friendly city, I think about Zillow and some of these real estate sites who will tell you the walkability score of the house you're purchasing. Do you see in the future people going, well, okay, what is the age-friendly score of this house in this location?
Yeah.
Is that kind of a cultural evolution?
Well, it's a thing. It's called a livability index because, again, Zillow is just focused on the physical house and maybe, how close businesses are. But when things are age-friendly, they think about transportation, housing, businesses and services, access to healthcare. So it really is a multi-sector approach within a certain geographic area. And when all of those sectors work together to make something age-friendly, that's when kind of the magic happens. So making sure that you can. So again, it goes back to not only access to Uber, and Lyft and those types of things, which part of the problem is even though that technology is there, for most older adults, particularly over like 80 years old, we have this digital divide where they don't have smartphones, or the smartphones are too complex for them to navigate. And Lyft and Uber, like imagine if you only had a landline, right, and you called your ride. And you think about how much we rely on technology. You can't be on your landline trying to tell someone how to get to you. So there's still some gaps that we need to close. And I'll tell you this story. Olivia and I traveled to a volleyball tournament a year and a half ago when she was still in high school. And when we got off the plane in Charlotte, we go to the bathroom, and when we come out, Olivia, she goes, "Oh, look, we just got our upgrade." And I was like, "Oh, look, they also just changed our gate. So let's go." So because we had those two devices, well, we got to the gate, and there were 3 older adults in wheelchairs and one sitting in like a regular chair. They were all talking. So of course, me being the geriatric nurse, and now Olivia, because she's my kid, we're watching them and paying attention. And I was like, okay, this is really great because it's kind of like an unaccompanied minor. So the airline service has this program here. And it was obvious that the 3 in the wheelchairs were part of kind of the assistance program to help them get back and forth. Well, the one lady that was sitting in a regular chair, she's like, "Hey, wait a second. My flight was supposed to have left like an hour ago. And they were like, oh, so then everybody starts getting anxious. Well, she got up and kind of made her way over to the checkout lady, or the checkout ticket counter lady. And when she looked, the ticket agent was like, oh, ma'am, your gate changed like an hour and a half ago and your flight's been gone for an hour. And you think about how noisy, and she had a paper ticket. So the background noise, you can't ever hear anything when it goes over the loudspeaker. So you think about how much we rely on technology as a society. And so we have to, and I was telling the story to actually the virtual assistant with my podcast. And she goes, wouldn't it be nice if when you got off the airplane, if you registered for one of those like devices, like if you were to put your name on the list to go into a restaurant, wouldn't it be neat if they had something like that you could carry if you didn't have a smartphone, and it would alert you to tell you that your gate had changed without relying on overhead announcements? So industries like the airline industry needs to catch up, with older travelers. So there's even, this concept of being an age-friendly business, but that's one example of how much we rely on technology, but then also the difference in the two, and how do businesses adjust for their older consumers.
Well, you're so right, and I hadn't even thought about that. That maybe when people are even booking their tickets, there should be a question that asks whether or not you have electronic devices to alert you or not. Everybody, you can always opt in to get text messages or other kinds of things, but that's making the assumption that you've got the technology, and it's a matter of deciding how much you want to use the technology. But in this particular instance, folks at the airlines did not know that this woman relied completely on overhead announcements. There's no box that says, I do not have any technology except what's at the airport. And maybe you're right. Businesses and industries need to rethink the questions that they're asking their customers so that they can better serve them. I mean, you would think that that's a no-brainer, and yet until you just told that story, it didn't occur to me that airlines need to be asking different questions. And I think that's part of the problem too. There's a book called A More Beautiful Question. It talks about if you want a more beautiful answer, you ask a more beautiful question. And so when we come back from our break, we're gonna ask you, Melissa, what questions should we be asking in our communities and our businesses, whether it's healthcare, what should we be asking? So I hope everyone will join us after this break.
I work out every day. COVID won't kill me.
I'm 24. COVID won't kill me.
I have antibodies. COVID won't kill me.
It's been a long week. COVID won't kill me.
I'm 25. COVID won't kill me.
I'm partying outside. COVID won't kill me.
I don't need to wear a mask around my friends. COVID won't kill me.
I'm 23. COVID won't kill me.
If I haven't gotten it yet, COVID won't kill me.
I'm young. COVID won't kill me.
Famous last words. Don't let them be yours. Socially distance. Mask up, America.
America, land of the free. It's at the core of who we are. Freedom. The freedom to live without fear, to drive through all 50 states, to sleep safely in our own beds, the freedom to jog where we please, to watch birds in the park, to wear a hoodie, the freedom to breathe. Before we celebrate the freedom most Americans have, we must fight for the freedom all Americans deserve. Because no matter your religion, gender, disability, age, race, all lives can't matter until Black lives matter.
Our fight against coronavirus isn't over. Let's wear face masks in public. Stay 6 feet or more from others. Follow state and local guidelines. And wash our hands frequently. Let's move forward together. Learn more at coronavirus.gov.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. We're talking about designing age-friendly communities tonight with Melissa Batchelor, PhD. who is both a nurse educator. She specializes in gerontology. She hosts a podcast called This Is Getting Old, Moving Towards an Age-Friendly World. And we're delighted to have her talk to us about what we need to be thinking about when we think about age-friendly communities. So we were talking about asking better questions, and you briefly mentioned in our first segment, Melissa, about healthcare and the responsiveness of healthcare to the people that need more support. So what should we be asking?
Well, I can tell you about the age-friendly health systems, because you can't really have an age-friendly city and community if you don't have age-friendly healthcare. And this has been an issue for as long as I've been in geriatrics. When you think about how hospitals and healthcare systems have been set up, there's always a children's hospital, and then the rest of the hospital is just the hospital, even though over 60% of the people in the beds in the hospital are 65 and older. So, you think about how the signage isn't large print, things are difficult to navigate. They don't have navigators to help you get from where you parked your car to get into your appointment. So that's kind of, again, some of the work that's been done now to have like more geriatric friendly emergency rooms. And so what they were trying to do is kind of create these pockets of specialists in geriatrics. And we're at the point now that in 10 years, the last boomers are going to turn 65, and it's going to be the first time in human history that we have more people over the age of 65 than we have children under 5 for the first time in human history. So the age-friendly health systems movement is an attempt to try to geriatricize hospitals and healthcare systems so that everyone has a core set of knowledge. So this came out of the John A. Hartford Foundation, and they partnered with the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, or IHI, to create age-friendly health systems. And the 4 pillars of that are called the 4 M's. So what matters, what's important to the older adult, medication, mentation, and mobility. And if a hospital or a healthcare system, even primary care and long-term care, if they are practicing around those 4 M's, they're going to be practicing towards the heart of what geriatric care involves. So that's kind of that's the short version.
Well, but you bring something really important. I don't think most of us walking around in everyday life have considered the fact, yes, we take for granted there are children's hospitals. There's all kinds of children's health programs, right? There's a lot of focus on children's health. And you've mentioned many times that, a majority of young nurses prefer to go into something that is not gerontology. A lot of them will opt for pediatric nursing or, NICU nursing, or something that is involved with children. And there's a tremendous appeal around the healthcare of children. But to consider that the majority of people and the rest of the beds in the hospitals are over 65 should give us all pause to ask, what are we doing to raise up the need to invest more in the healthcare of older people? And this comes back to finding more people who are interested in researching gerontology issues, getting hospitals to elevate the need. Your whole point about somebody not being able to find their way from their car to their appointment, like, it doesn't occur to us who don't struggle with that is really unbelievably important. And I can see where things could go terribly wrong.
Right. Well, they can and they do. And people miss appointments and they get stressed out. I mean, it's stressful enough if you are physically able to get where you need to go and mentally capable of getting there. So I think that the one thing that so there's a lot of work to be done. I know I had a thought and I just lost it.
Well, we were talking about, but to get people interested in gerontology, how do you get young people, doctors and nurses, how do we get them interested in these issues?
Yeah, so I'll tell you why healthcare systems are more reluctant to, because when you practice good geriatrics, you save your health system money. And so, when you're providing good geriatric care, it's about quality of care and saving hospitals, and hospitals, are there to generate revenue. So asking a person, an older adult, is it important for you to have an X-ray to diagnose your lung cancer? Is it important for you to know where you're at with that? Or should you have chemo and radiation? Like, all of those things are $, $, $. And if you say, well, what's important? And they say, what's important is my quality of life. And I want to be able to enjoy the rest of my life without throwing up all the time and losing my hair and having to be, poked and prodded and hooked up to chemo. If they say, no, it's more important for me to have quality of life, there's no revenue generated. And
Right.
so there's this, what are the values of our society and our culture? And then you also have the older adult who says, I want you to do everything. And so then they end up, typically there's only a small group of people that are generating a lot of the healthcare costs in this country. But so I think it's a different in philosophy and mindset, but again, asking people, what matters to you, how well can you get around, how's your thinking going, and are there any medications that we can take you off of? Again, saving everyone money, but the pharmacies don't make money,
There's a business model, in other words. Healthcare is a business model. And while we all kind of know that, we don't think of how it drives all kinds of decisions about where money is invested as far as programs. And you hit on something really important, and that is wellness. There's a lot of, getting older is inevitable. How we get older is not inevitable. The things that we think are normal health issues or normal parts of aging are not normal parts of aging. And most of us don't even know what is or is not normal. And so, it behooves all of us to take a look at what wellness means and invest money in keeping older people in their homes and active and give them that quality of life instead of constantly being reactionary as far as interventions of a medical nature. Talk a little bit about what we can do, all of us, to kind of demand a different kind of healthcare as we get older.
Well, I think that we need to reimagine what long-term care is and have a better understanding of what we want that future to look like. I mean, the majority of older adults do live in their homes, in their communities, and we do need to have a health promotion focus. So, and going back to what you said, people don't even know what normal aging is. It's like, to become demented or to become incontinent or become frail, like that's not normal aging. That is not what's supposed to happen. And so how do we, create a built environment, sidewalks so that you can walk and exercise, parks where they have, exercise equipment that you can use. How do we depend less on maybe automobiles and more on bicycles to improve strength and balance and flexibility? So I think it's a whole cultural shift about aging and respect for older adults. And I think that our biggest challenge to that is ageism. I mean, the World Health Organization actually has a global campaign to combat ageism. I mean, because it's really, of all the isms, when you think about racism, sexism, it's the only ism that's socially acceptable. And you can make a joke about an older person or about getting old and nobody says anything. But if it was, a gender or a racial ethnic joke, people would be all up in arms. And so until we, that's really the underlying piece that, they're like, they're just old. And to me, that's not acceptable.
It's not because all of us are going to be old. So to your point, it's kind of like not having respect for the aging process or older people is kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because we will all be there someday. And this is one of the reasons I think that we need to focus more resources, better policies, get businesses and communities to ask better questions so that they can build the thing all of us will need for ourselves. I mean, if nothing else, we should be pretty selfish about this. Like, I would prefer that we build it before I need it. And so I hope our viewers are asking themselves the same question, like, well, hang on a minute, wait, I'm going to need all of this someday. And so, why doesn't public policy or businesses or healthcare care more about the burgeoning, the enormous number of people who will be over 65 in the coming 10 to 20 years?
again, I think it goes back to ageism, and people don't really want to talk about getting old or getting older. But what we need to be building is an age-friendly ecosystem. So, looking at age-friendly, cities and communities, but also age-friendly public health, age-friendly universities, age-friendly businesses, and, really getting people to pay attention and to begin to design things towards that. And, I think that there's not enough, maybe it's not very exciting to people, because you think about what does get our attention. I mean, I'm doing my podcast called This Is Getting Old, and it's not like it went viral,
Right. Right. Like cereal or something,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's almost like you don't know what you need until you need it. And then you're like, how could there be this huge gap? So I think that's part of it, is how do we show people, educate people, increase their awareness? Because really, until you have an older parent that you're the one providing care for, everyone's busy and focused on themselves. And they're not really thinking about, what would this mean for me, in 15, 20 years? Because really, even for myself, I'm like, well, 15, 17 years, I'm going to be an older adult. But I will still be like, but I'm still super young.
Right. Because there's always people older than us. It's like, there are people who are 90, right? So I'm pretty young. I'm young on the older side. But, I think local government is also a place where people need to look at their city and town councils and the planning commission, zoning commission, and places where good decisions can be made better now.
Right. And I'll tell you, AARP has a whole Livability Roadmap series that has to do with, like, how do you bring multi-sector organizations together. So that's what we did with the Center for Aging, is that around, healthcare services, and kind of the roadmap for how you can help your city or community become more age-friendly. So those resources are available. They've already been developed. And, you can just download the PDFs of the book. We asked them if we could get 80 copies to pass out, for our first, we did 4 different seminar series. They sent those to us. So I would say to look at their website, find those roadmaps. If you need a paper copy, or you can use digital copies, they really want to spread and scale this to every community and city, in the U.S. And IHI will help you with the 4Ms or the age-friendly health systems if you don't have one of those.
And that is a great closing thought. Thank you so much, Melissa. Look for her podcast wherever you listen online. And this has been Your Need to Know.